morning, everybody. Welcome to Shift Church. We are super excited about today and cannot wait for you to meet our special guests. If this is your first time here, you can scan this QR code or the one at the welcome table. And if you fill out the Connect card, we'll send you some free coffee. Our first dinner group is coming up soon. We'll be at Curia on the Drag on June 24th from 5 to 7 p.m. You can register your spot by scanning the code and filling out the form. And you can either eat there or bring your own food. It's gonna be an awesome time, so don't miss out. Have you checked out our new podcast, Shift Happens? We're already getting really good feedback about how encouraging these stories are. So make sure you go check us out, subscribe, give us a rating, and share the episodes so that you can help others find healthier ways forward. And that's all that I have for We wanna jump right into our panel discussion. I forgot their names. That's all that I have for you guys today. We want to jump right into our panel discussion. So please welcome Denise Devonish and Donn Smith Lopez.
How about we just start right there at the very beginning? Why don't you guys start with your background, where you grew up, did you grow up in church, that kind of stuff.
So once again, my name is Denise Devonish, and I'm from Barbados and grew up in Barbados till I was 19. When you grow up in the islands, there's no, did you grow up in a church? The island is church, because school, all your schooling, everything is church related. So, you know, every church, everything, Ash Wednesday, every school walked to a church. We did all the church things. So, but I, thank God my parents did not force me to go to church. Like, they had to go to church. I think they said like 3-4 days a week when they were young. So I didn't have to do that, but I did go to a church because my friends went to the church. So it was like, oh, I could go hang out with my friends at church. So that was kind of the biggest reason of going to church back then. But unlike the US, where you only hear about God in church, that was not the case. Because when you, like I said, when you grow up in an island, you hear about God and Jesus and everything else 24/7. That's just an everyday thing. Like, you know, in an example is from elementary school, you start school with a prayer, like an hour of prayer and all that stuff. And then before you go to lunch, you have to pray. When you come back from lunch, you pray. Before you go home, you pray. And this was not a Catholic school. This was regular school. So that is kind of giving an example of what it was like growing up there, even though I didn't go to church.
Was it Catholic denomination?
No, we are mainly Anglican. So very few of the islands are predominantly Catholic. So for the U.S. Protestant.
So again, Donn Smith Lopez. Grew up here in Gainesville, actually Micanopy. My family has been there for a few generations. I grew up, the church experience I had growing up was more like church light. We definitely were not Baptist, so the other church in town was the Methodist church. So we were Methodists, and it was very close to where my grandmother lived. So we would go on special occasions, of course, the holy days. And then my father's parents, who lived in Hamilton County, just north of here, they were Baptists. Like every Sunday Baptist, every Wednesday night, they went to church. So we quite often went to church for Easter. And for Christmas, we'd go up to my grandmother's house. So I have wonderful memories of that growing up, of Easter services and going to Sunday school at a Baptist Sunday school. And then they would we'd all go back, you know, everyone would go to their homes, and everyone then would bring the food back in the afternoon and have the big Sunday on the grounds, the food on the grounds. And holy moly, you could eat for days. It's good Southern cooking too. It's the good stuff. So those were my memories growing up with church, but we were never churchgoers growing up. I grew up in a very Southern family, so very country Southern, like middle-class Southern family, but hunters, fishermen, definitely roles for men and roles for women, as you know, they understood them, of the kind of the gender roles. So it was, you know, it definitely a different experience than yours.
So at what point in the upbringing that you guys had, as vastly different as they were, at what point during that upbringing did you begin to realize, begin to recognize that your sexuality wasn't quite, I hate to use the word norm, but heteronormative in the area that you were in?
So for me, that didn't hit me till I had moved to the US, which was at 19. Because you didn't see gay people. So there wasn't a thing. It wasn't something that I knew existed to say, and the only gay people I knew were transgendered men, and I think one lesbian woman that everybody in the island knew that she was a lesbian, and that was it. So I had crushes on, on women, but I dated guys because that's what you did, and so there was not even a, when you hear representation matters, there's a lot more to that than people think. Like, initially what we all think of that is that, oh, I see a black person doing this, then I know I can do this. But it's more, for me, it would have been more like, oh, I see a gay person, that is what gay is. So that, oh, that's what I am, and without knowing. So I didn't even know my side of it to have it out there to recognize it. So the church had no influence on that for me young, because I just didn't know. I know that's kind of hard for a lot of people to understand, especially if you live in the US. But, growing up in the 70s and 80s on an island, there was just not that. That was just not. And on TV, we had, for my most growing up, we had just had one channel. So the American shows that we got were like Cosby and, Sanford and Son and those kind of things. Well, there was no gay people then either on TV. So I didn't even have that. And if there was a gay person, it was usually a transgender, like a drag queen kind of thing. So it was usually a comical thing as opposed to something that's just normal. So unfortunate for me, I had to live in a world that I knew I was different in the sense that guys were just fun because I love sports and they could talk sports all day, and most of my female friends didn't want to do that. So that was the cool thing to do, and I was like, oh, I like hanging out with you because we could talk sports all day and we could watch sports all day, and and I didn't like to do the girly thing, so that it was perfect. So
You should talk to my husband. He loves sports, and I'm not the sporty guy at all. That's him. Growing up again in that Southern culture, it was very clear that gay was wrong. It was instilled that a fag is a fag, kind of thing, and it was. I knew very young that I was different, that I was unique, and I had a lot of friends that were girls, whereas little boys would, like back in that day, would steer towards like trucks and like sports and getting dirty and things like that. I wanted to hang out with the girls, and we would play with their kitchen and play with their dolls and things like that. And as I got into school, like kindergarten and elementary school, in my very young mind, I adapted myself. I realized I'm standing out. I need to adjust myself to fit in to what everyone thinks I should be. So I kept, one of the things that protected me was keeping those friendships with those my girlfriends, the friends that were girls, actually did protect me, because having so many females around me, all the young guys wanted to know the girls, and they were too scared to talk to the girls, but they could talk to me so I could introduce them to the girls. So I had a lot of girls that were very close with me. And I had girlfriends, and going, in that kind of elementary, middle school kind of girlfriends kind of thing. And I had my first serious girlfriend when I was 16. And I realized it was a click in my mind where I realized I'm going down the path with this young woman where we had dated for a couple of years, kind of we were at the end of our high school time, and I realized, and we were very serious with each other, as you can imagine, in high school. So I realized if this goes any further, we're probably going to get married and we're going to start a family at a young age. Her parents loved me. My parents loved her. And so I made a shift. I said, I realized that I needed to do something different. So I joined the Army to get away, to have an excuse to get away, essentially. And her and I ended up breaking up. But that was my period of transitioning from that kind of role that I had of this, straight kid, straight guy who had all of these internalized feelings. And then when I got to, the broader world, and when I was in the military, and I was young, I was only 17 when I joined the Army. And I was reserve, so it wasn't like I was away for 4 years. I reserved, so did my training and came back home. When I came back home, it was like, this is a different world. I've seen the world a little bit. So that kind of started my journey to coming out and being myself.
That was not the turn I thought that story was going to take. I was not expecting. So I joined the military. Yeah, that's one way to deal with it. Yes. So you're going through all of this, and I sent you guys this, the questions before, but I'll even broaden it just a little bit. That next question talking about what did your religion tell you about your sexuality growing up? I'll even throw in there, because it seems like for both your stories, your culture shaped a lot versus just your religion. So specifically, what did your religion, what did your culture tell you about what you were going through?
So, and it's the same, I guess, in the island, it's the same as right now here. Everything was about gay men, because of course everybody thinks about gay male sex, so that's where it goes back to. So that is where you heard a lot of jokes, and so females, you never really heard anything about lesbians at all. You never heard anything really about lesbians, so it's almost like they didn't exist. So, but culturally, you knew that gay was not good growing up, But for me, like I said, being from an island, it was very different in that I never was exposed to anyone lesbian, and even I guess I remember my parents had one gay male friend that I knew. And we all knew he was gay, but he was like funny gay, so he was cool gay, but, and my mom's hairdresser was gay. I remember that too, because she talked about him.
Of course, yeah.
She did, but I never had met him. But, it was just so different because it wasn't there. You didn't have it to see it. So it's like you're trying to you're something that, as far as no one else in the world is. So you don't even know that you're it, because you don't know what it is. So you left home at 17. I came to the U.S. at 19. And a big part, when I came, I knew that I did not want to go back home, because I knew I couldn't be me there, but I didn't know what me was yet. But I just knew something was way off for me.
So we did not have any gay friends. My parents didn't have any gay friends. I didn't have any gay friends. I grew up in kind of the 80s, were my formative years in high school. And that was, of course, the time of AIDS. And there was no medication at the time. Essentially, as a gay man, if I were to have been an adult gay man at that time, everyone considered it a death sentence, right? Of course, it wasn't necessarily for all gay men. It was tragic for those that did not survive the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 80s. But that terrified me, and it terrified that my family saw that and encapsulated being gay as a gay man means you will get HIV and we will die of AIDS very quickly. And that to me was like, it was just a straight path. And I realized that I had to, number one, protect myself, but also protect my family, because I didn't want to, it was a shameful thing for my family. So I realized very quickly that I needed to step away. So I decided to, after 17, after the military, go to school in Miami, get away from Gainesville. I decided to travel abroad for a while. Again, get away as far as possible from my family so that I could live my true self without being around my family. I'd call, hey, things are going great. No, I haven't met anyone. No, I'm just traveling. No, I'm studying. No, I'm working really hard. That sort of thing. And I realized one of the first experiences I had with my parents saying anything negative about a gay person was, I still remember to this day, I mentioned the Methodist Church. There was an older female couple, and I know to now that they were a female couple. They were an older couple. They were probably in their 60s, 70s, and they were inviting the kids to go. They had a tennis court, and they wanted the kids to come and help clean it off, and they were going to throw a pizza party. And I wanted to go do that. And my mom said something very negative, like, well, you could go if you want to, but those old queers, those queer women. And she said it, I think, just because innately she was raised that way, but also it stuck with me that word queer. That's one of the powerful things about reclaiming the word queer. The LGBTQ community has reclaimed that word because it was so derogatory growing up. It was so painful being queer. So the religion part of it is very different because mine definitely is more of a cultural part, and trying to protect myself from the culture of the South rather than a particular religious protection.
So for both of you, internally, you're going through these things. The culture at large, the little bit of religion that's part of that is all telling you something different. So what did that do to you internally as you were growing up?
What it does is think of like a flower that's supposed to open up, and instead of opening up, like something caps it, and then just pushes it back, and then pushes the entire plant back down underneath the earth. So that's kind of what it was like. I knew something was different. I knew, but I also knew, like you said, you knew you couldn't explore that difference. So I knew that, all right, this is what I have to do. And when your friends and your family are all making gay jokes, especially after I'd come to the US and started coming into myself and realizing, okay, this is what you are. I went home a lot. So it was like, oh, whenever I went back home, I knew I was going back home to be straight. But I also knew that I was going back home recognizing that I was wrong or bad or all the things you can think of, and I told Joe about this example. One year, I was home for Christmas. So Christmas is our Thanksgiving, and Christmas is a big thing for family there. And you go to church Christmas morning, whether you've never been to church all year, you go to church Christmas morning at 5:00. So I went to church with my dad. So we have a 5, a 7, and a midnight the night before. But I went to church with my dad, and the entire service was how evil being gay was. Christmas morning. I was like, what the heck? Why am I here? And, from that day, I was like, I'm not going back in another church in the islands. I'm just not doing it. Just because of all the days of the year that you preach against gay people, it was Christmas morning. So, and everybody in the church was all happy because as far as they were concerned, yes, the gay people are bad. And my dad knew I was gay by then, but he was still happy too because he was not happy with me being gay, and you're talking. I had to laugh when you talked about the conversations, the calls home. So it was literally, I would call every time I call home. You'd have the normal talk, and then every so often, I would say about twice a year, this question would come from my dad: "Are you still that way?" And I would go, "Yes," and then we would go back to the normal conversation. It would just be that question. I answered yes, and we went along, and that was the end of all of it.
I totally can relate. Totally. Mine was very similar in that it just was a don't ask, don't tell. I came out at 23 when I was, in my head, I thought, well, if I have my college degree, then I can make myself in the world. And even if my parents disowned me and my entire family did not want to talk to me because they would know the truth, I could still make a living and survive without my family's support. Not financial support, but loving support. You know, they're right behind me. If they didn't have my back, I could still make it. And of course, that's luckily, blessedly, that's not what happened. You know, I had my family's love. My dad did not understand, again, that very Southern hunter, fisherman, outdoorsman, construction worker guy mentality. God bless him. And I do love my dad. He just passed last year, so we had a chance to reconcile that. I don't want to go down that road. But growing up, I did not have a relationship with God. I was actually considered myself atheist for the longest time. When I went into the military, they ask you what your religion is, and I actually told them that I did not believe in God. So it had no REGPREF, no religious preference on your dog tag, you know, your little metal dog tags. I did not have a relationship with God at all because I felt that there was no church for me. That back then I thought church equaled your relationship with God, the building and the people. Now, obviously, I realize that is not the case. Like, God is in you, God is around you, and we share that space together as a church community, as a family of faith. But I realized that I needed to get there on my own, or I wasn't going to get there at all. So maybe, did I answer the question? I think I did.
All right.
To that. So and I haven't touched on this yet. I always had a relationship with God, always. And unlike you, God was my buddy because I was the only child for a long time, and I read a lot because one channel makes you read a lot. But I've always had a very strong relationship with God, and I've always with God as my friend. So, you know, we always have conversations, we laugh, I do something stupid, I was like, I know you saw that, but this is from a kid, you know, so I can't even tell you where that came from, because it was just always there. So I never felt like the church deserted me, I felt people did, because I never had the church to begin with. It was never a thing for me. And I told Joe this, like, you know, I'm very analytical and I always question things. And Jehovah's Witness stopped coming to my house because I asked them too many questions. Like, they would just skip my house because it would, you know, like, things didn't make sense. I'm going to ask you all this, and like, you know, and then when they can't answer, they're like, okay, we just, like, see
Maybe
you.
you cracked the code right
Yeah.
there.
You know, but also unlike you, which was unfortunate for me, when I did come out, I lost my family. I had an aunt and an uncle that were the best, but my parents and a lot of my family back home, I didn't go home for 5 years. I went home twice a year. So and it was rough. Even though my one aunt who lived in Boston and was like everything to me, even though I had her, like, losing your parents, you know, it was like my parents had died and it was as if I had died to them. So it was the same thing, and it was really hard. And I, like you, I didn't come out till I was working, till I was completely self-sufficient, and I actually had a partner then, and because I knew then I had someone to lean on, so it was easier, but I knew that they were going to take it rough, but I didn't expect 5 years of nothing. Like, our phone calls were birthdays and Christmas. That was it. So we did the rounds for those calls, but it was hard. I felt like I was a 6-year-old abandoned by my parents, like, at a train station. Like, and even though I was an adult, and even though I had a partner and I had other friends and other couple other family members that I was really close to, that was the feeling for like those 5 years. It was like I was completely abandoned, and they felt within their right that it was okay. And like, unlike you, my dad died 6 years ago, and we never reconciled it. But I knew he loved me completely, but he could not wrap his brain around loving his daughter for who she was. You know, he wanted, as much as he knew what the person I was, he wanted me to be something else, which is his loss, not mine.
So I'm just going to call an audible here. Don't share anything that you are not comfortable with. You don't have to answer any question. But would you guys be willing to share? You did, and you kind of spoke into that. But just thankfully, you didn't have to experience it to this extent. But just that build up to like, okay, I'm going to come out. You know, as a straight cis man, I have never had to go to my parents and say something to them or ask them something. I've gotten in plenty of trouble about stupid stuff, but I've never done anything where I worried, will my parents talk to me after this? That has never been a thought process for me. I have never had to go through that emotional turmoil of just building up to that, regardless of whatever But can you guys speak to that? Maybe share that a little bit?
So I didn't come out like, Dad, Mom, sit down. I took my girlfriend home. So that's what I did. And I was like, I went home first, and then she met me. Then she came in a couple of days later, actually a week later, because I was home for 2 weeks. And I mean, you know, I was like 24, 25, and I hadn't seen her for a week, so I was like super happy. So they could tell, and they had to talk with me more than anything. And then, you know, and I told them, and you know, the disgust for them. My mom, like, legit, I never saw her again from my trip, and we were in the same house. Every time we were home, she went in her room and shut the door. But you know, I laugh now. The good thing was, I got her car for the entire second week because she wanted me out the house. So, but yeah, it was, I mean, my grandmother, my mom's mom, I remember her coming, like, sitting me down one day, and I love this woman. This woman loved me like anything else. Like, I was her everything. And she was like, you cannot live in that woman's house. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, when you go back, you must find another place. And I was like, I'm not going to. And then I found out years later, she took me out she took me out of everything because of that. And you know, I still loved her after and still was kind to her and everything else. But it was all about God. Their entire thing would come back to, you know, you're going to go to hell. Everything that in their belief system was, well, let me rephrase that. They used God to say that this is why this was wrong, you know. So it wasn't like a coming out. It was like, F you, this is what I am kind of thing. Like, I just took her.
That's brave. It took me years to bring a boyfriend home. Years.
I would not do that. In this adult brain now, like the 24-year-old,
Yeah.
This would not do that.
Well, I came out to my parents that I told you about. I graduated from college. Literally, I graduated at the end of the fall semester, so like December. And I was in Miami in school. And so all my family came down. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So it was a big deal. Whole family came down. And I was having yes, I went to college in Miami, but I lived on Miami Beach when you could live on Miami Beach and when it was a nice place to live on Miami Beach. And let's say that was the epicenter of the LGBTQ community at the time. So I had a great college experience. It wasn't a horrible experience for me. So my parents, I realized that was the time to do it. And I have a very close person in my life. Her name is Jackie, and I consider her like a sister. I call her my sister. And her and I have known each other all the way since we were 17, 18 together. And we lived together. We were roommates in Miami Beach. And I came back home for the holidays. And I realized this is when I'm going to do it. I've graduated from college. I have a support system in my sister Jackie. And I have tons of friends down in Miami Beach. I can do this. I can get through this. And so I did have can we have breakfast tomorrow morning? And like, my family was not like the sit down and have like breakfast together kind of people. They're like, yes, sure, we can do that. So I went to bed really early because, of course, I was crazy nervous. And oh no, it was terrible. Terrible butterflies. I felt nauseous. I felt just like the lump in your throat. So we sat down the next morning, could barely eat, and said, and literally you have to tell these people that love you. Hi there. Hi, baby. I've got 2 kids at home, so I love this. I had to essentially tell my mom, Dad, I'm gay. And once the words were out, it was like just this flood of relief, isn't it? It's gone. It's out there. It's out there in the world. And like you said, Joe, it's horrible that kids have to feel like they do that. But now we've empowered that too. That's why you have a National Coming Out Day, because once you've done it, you've said your truth. And it's not a lie anymore. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's who you are. It's who you've always been. So my parents, my dad was totally taken aback. My mom said it was either drugs or that. So I'm glad it's not drugs. Well, Mama had a really good time in Miami Beach. Should I tell you that part? I shouldn't say that. But it was, I'm just joking. But it was cathartic, and it was also terrifying because my dad instantly went into shutdown mode, where we were having dinner at my grandmother's house. We were also in Micanopy, so very nearby. And my whole family was there. By that time, I didn't mention this, I'd come out to everybody else pretty much in my family except for my parents. Like my grandmother and I were she passed away 10 years ago, and her and I were like this. We were very, very close. And I actually came out to her for one of the first people I came out to, and my sister, my biological sister, who I'm also very close to still. And so my parents were kind of last in the trail. And so by the time we got to dinner that night, everybody was like, oh, I'm glad that's over. Now he's out. Finally, we can all actually talk about this. It's not a big secret anymore. But my dad called my grandmother's house, and my mom answered the phone. She talked to him briefly, and he told me, he said, I don't understand it. I hope I will one day, but you're my son, and I will always love you. And that right there said all that I needed to know to get me through it, and to know that my family was still going to be there, even though we may not be tight. And that's how you mentioned about Christmas and the holidays. I mentioned going to my grandparents' house and how tight that was on holidays, like religious holidays. And I lived in California. Again, I was still running away. Even though I was out to them, I still didn't want them to know who I really was. So I lived in California, and my vacation back home, or my trip back home, was always Thanksgiving. So I didn't have to ever deal with the religious part of it. I would never have to go to my grandmother's church, and because I knew that everyone knew by that point, I was out to everyone. I didn't want anyone staring at me or getting like oh, the sinners here in the house kind of BS, you would get. So that was the way of protecting myself, as I lived far away. I never went home for the holidays. But then now, in looking back, you were saying like it was, I missed that part of that life. I missed my niece growing up because I lived so far away. Her and I are very tight now. She's a wonderful person. But you protect yourself even after you're out, because you are still in the society that we live in. It's still in so many different areas. It's come so far in the last, especially the last 15, 20 years. But it's really been a journey to make sure that people understand that being gay, being transgender, being queer, non-binary, it's innately who you are and how you feel. And it's not for me to ask for your permission to love me or to accept me. It's your responsibility.
I try to tell people who don't understand, it's like being gay is like being black. It is. There's nothing else about it, but with a lot of people who want to hate it, they can't. They're like, well, you have a choice. And my always comeback is like, who in the world will ever choose to be hated by others? That's not a thing that we choose.
It's funny you say that, because one of the things, as my journey through deconstruction and stuff, one of the things that I thought about, and that I never really thought it was a choice, but I also thought about, can I remember a time in my growing up, in my adolescence, teenage years, that I sat down and thought, I'm going to like girls. That was never a choice. It just was. And that was one of those moments for me. It was like, well, I didn't pick that. It just was. I always liked girls. That's just it, right? Anyway, so let's switch gears here just real fast. We're going to start to land the plane. So as a queer person, okay, as a queer person, what does it do to you personally? Like, how does it make you feel, the emotions that it brings up when people or politicians or state governments target you or people within the queer community?
I don't even know where to begin with this living in Florida, because I have all the things that our governor does not like, so including being foreign. So what it does in a nutshell is it terrifies me to the point where I am looking at other states to move to, where it would be safer for me, and not just against, it's not, the thing is, it's not the governor. Like, I'm not afraid of him coming to my house, but it's the people he incites that will then have a couple drinks and then not be in any sort of rational form and do something. So we are going backwards at a 200 mile per hour rate. Like, it is scary how backwards we're going. And not just the state, the country. Like, there's so many things happening right now that you just can't even keep up with. And, I see a lot of younger people here, and God knows, I hope that I'm living when you guys can vote. I hope you can vote, because you're the change. And I know that you don't think like a lot of older people do, even people my age, because I have absolutely amazing, great friends who will still vote for people based on the party affiliation and not even look and see what the person they're voting for thinks about their dear friend or would do to their dear friend. Forget thinks, because the thoughts are one thing, the actions are bigger, and the actions are happening. So, but I know, my hope is that I'm living long enough that I am here when the younger people are taking over, because I know it will shift. But in that meantime, like that good 10 to 20 years, what's going to happen? Like, that's the part that is really scary, is like what's going to happen. And like, I know everybody in this room and who's listening and will listen, I was probably like 95% of the people are like, oh, we think like you, we vote like you, and we, our actions are what your actions are. But it's all the others. So yeah, it terrifies the heck out of me.
It's terrifying, but it also empowers me to work even harder, to make the difference, because for every voice on that side of the room, shouting hatred, discrimination, oppression, there's louder voices, I believe, on this side of the room. I don't literally mean this side of the room, but on the other side of the other side of the way. I know we should do like that, right? Standing up for not only the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, but also our brothers and sisters of color, our brothers and sisters that are from other countries that want to live the American dream or make America their home, just like so many of our ancestors. Unless we were Native American and you're full-blooded American, then you're an immigrant, in one way or another. Your heritage is as an immigrant to this country. But the terrorization that the supermajority and the governor, who literally will do anything to win the White House. He will step on anyone, bulldoze over any right, because he needs those votes. And that's a very powerful position to be in. But politically, it's very savvy. It's very cunning. It's very strategic. So if you know that, then you can fight against it. For all those years that I was in California, doing my thing, working, having friends, going about my business, I never got involved with anything. I never volunteered for anything. I never like stood up and said, no, that's not right. I mean, I went to the Pride Parade, but it really was a party. Now it's a protest in my life. I mean, sure, we have a good time too, but it's a protest. Stonewall was a protest, not a party, right? So I started getting involved more and more because when I moved back to Florida, and I always thought when I was in California, well, Florida's my home. I live in California, but Florida's my home. And I saw the change and the progression and the positive things that were happening in Florida. So when I moved back, I realized I want to get involved. I want to do something. So I started volunteering. I got involved with Equality Florida. Now, as with Joe, I'm involved with the Pride Center more locally, but also started getting involved politically, like you were mentioning. And politically doesn't mean you have to go stand on the street corners with the signs. If you want to do that, great. But it's getting to know the politicians, getting to know what they stand for, because elections matter. Elections matter so much. I mean, we see it today. What would happen today? Imagine this: if Andrew Gillum would have won instead of DeSantis, right? What a difference our world would be in. Yep. So that's why elections matter, but also matter locally. I mean, because of the way the progressive mindset of our local elected leaders in the city and county level. I don't mean this to go on a political bent, but we are very lucky to live in a city and county in which we are supported by our local leaders, is what I mean to say. So it is terrifying that these laws are out there, but we're fighting. They're fighting every single day against them. And there's attorneys, there's advocates, there's other folks that are trying to overturn or at least lessen the impact, because these laws are impacting folks every single day. Children that are trying to live their true identities. I shouldn't want to say children, I mean, adolescents and not young children, but adolescents. They're trying to live their true identity. Adults trying to be their authentic selves and who they believe innately they are with their identity. And it's just empowering to know that, we can make a difference if we keep fighting and having these kind of conversations, and realizing that we are in this to win this together.
So I want to say something else to this, and one thing I want people to really realize is that, so as a Black woman living in this area, Gainesville is nice, not the other parts. And I used to work protective services with child abuse, and I had a shotgun pointed at my head at a house that I went to with a person saying to me, "I'm not letting a nigger come in my house." So here's why my fear is strong, is because now, then I was gay then, but I wasn't out. Like, I wasn't social media out, Now that's there. So now there's two things that I can't hide, even if I wanted to. So I want people to really understand that this is a true fear of life. That this is like, and that's why we need people, especially white males, that can stand up and be heard. Like, I start to talk, a lot of people will turn off because of who I am. They start to talk, people will listen. And as sad as it is, we need this for all of us to live in a world where we're just accepted as who we are. But when I honestly tell you that I am fearful, that I am getting to that point where I'm like really considering moving, is because I literally do fear my life, and not from my friends or Gainesville, but it doesn't take. A lot of people come to Gainesville that are not from Gainesville. And a lot of people who live in Alachua County are very different. All you gotta do is go on Gainesville word of mouth. Mm. That alone will tell you what there is out there and the hate that there is out there. I had to come out of that Facebook page because it put my stomach in knots for me, like wanting to go out. And I was like, I can't live like this. So I just didn't want to hear or see it anymore. But there are some really crazy people that you just give them a little alcohol and the crazy and the hate is, but the action comes out, not just the words.
So switching gears again, because this is kind of like the last question, and we definitely do not want to end there. So my last question for you guys is, what hope do you have right now? What hopes do you have right now? And then how does your faith inform those hopes?
So I kind of spoke on my hopes earlier, the young people. Like, even the young people of parents who are very conservative and hateful, those young people are really, their eyes are much more open than it was 10, 15 years ago. So my hope is that my religion-based, faith-based hope, nothing has changed for me, because God is still my buddy, and I am like, I'm in my car, and my friends will laugh, like, I'm in my car by myself, and I have conversations with God the whole time. And I will curse, and I was like, I know you heard that, but I know you get it. It's like, like, I'm a firm believer that God, like we say God knows everything, but then people say and do things and think that God didn't see it. Well, I know, so I'm like, I know you saw and heard me do that, but I didn't really mean it, and I'm okay now. Like, I let it go. Like, I just had to get it out. Like, but so I have faith in the future. I just don't know when that good part will come, but I know it's coming. And obviously, not to get political, but next year is going to be big. Next year is going to be so big that I might even move back to Barbados based on what happens. So that big. But, I trust in God. So for me personally, I know I'll be okay wherever, whatever it is. That God will guide me to where I need to be and who I need to be around, and I'll be good.
God's got your back.
Always.
Yeah, always. My faith definitely gives me hope. I'm part of a church community at United Church of Gainesville, which is a 50-plus-year-old congregation who went through that whole discernment period to become an open, what they call the United Church of Christ, which is our denomination, an open and affirming church, where you're welcoming people of the LGBTQ community. You're saying that not only can they be a part of the church and be members, but also leadership and are celebrated and are part of this fabric and culture of the church. And my husband and I, we were dating at the time. We wanted to find a church community, so we church shopped a little bit, and we landed within UCG a little over 10 years ago. And it's been amazing experience. That gives me hope that my children, I have a 5-year-old, 5.5-year-old about to go into kindergarten next year, and a 4-year-old, Allie and Devin. And they absolutely give me hope. And that's why I fight. That's why I'm involved. That's why I keep doing the side work that I do. My husband thinks it's a whole second job sometimes, volunteering. It really is, Joe, isn't it? Yeah. If y'all ever want to get real busy, come join the Pride Board. Rise to the board. You'll see. You'll get very busy because there's so much work to be done. But like you were saying, Denise, the young people out there, when we hold events or rallies or protests or parties or whatever it is, even locally, the amount of young people that come out, they get it. They totally get it. And that gives me hope. And also the fact that we still are making progress. I mean, I never thought marriage equality would happen in my lifetime, ever. And the fact my husband and I have been married for now going on 8 years and have 2 beautiful kids that we co-parent with a lesbian couple who we met through church, actually. Amazing women, Holly and Arwen. And it's that positivity that also keeps driving me forward, and my faith in God. Because I was able, as I mentioned, being an atheist before, I did find God in my adulthood, and I found Christ in my heart, in my life. And I'm proud of that now. I'm proud of saying that. Joe and I have had conversations about religion too, and it's great to have friends like Joe, but also others that I can have a conversation about God in my life and religion in my life, but also pride in my life. Pride as in LGBTQ pride, as well as being just a proud person. But also, as you were saying, he's privileged. As a white, cisgendered male, I have that privilege, and I need to use that in the right way because there's others that can't, right? They're standing in that position. And also, we need making sure that our allies, that's the biggest thing. LGBTQ people could stand up all day, fight in the streets. It's the allies the allies, the like-minded allies that get it, that realize it, that know that, we can't, the cause can't do it alone. The fight for our brothers and sisters of color. Like, we can't do that alone as people of color, or you as a person of color. My husband is Puerto Rican. He's a person of color. He can't do that alone. We need allies to step in and fight with that.
Well, thank you guys very much. Yeah, please let them know. Thank you. Yeah. If you guys want to go ahead, yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. We will do our just kind of our reflection time. And I don't want to add. I don't want to take away anything that they wanted to say. But as we were talking, I was thinking through the things that we talk about all the time of that in Matthew 7, where Jesus talks about the narrow road, right, and the wide road. That the narrow road, that few that find it, that leads to life, and the wide road that many find that leads to destruction. And we've talked about it a million times about how Jesus is not talking about something that's coming later, but something that's happening now. And so for us, I think the challenge is, how do we continue to find that narrow path? How do we continue to find the way to treat and love people the way that we're called to, that leads to life? Because the path that our culture is on currently is a wide path that is causing destruction around us. And so what does that look like as people of faith? What does that look like for those of us that aren't part of the queer community, but that are allies? How do we align ourselves with people that are being marginalized, not only by the state, but historically by the church, right? And so as we go into that moment of kind of reflection, I'll pray for us. The band will come up and they're going to do one more song, and we'll turn the lights down. And anybody that's willing or wanting to, you can participate in communion. And I think today that part of our reflection time is remembering the people that Jesus included in the kingdom. And that's part of the reason why they murdered him. The gospel isn't offensive because of who it excludes. It's horribly offensive because of who it includes. And that's gospel truth. And so I think that that's part of our reflection time this morning. All right, pray with me. Creator, we thank you for today. We thank you for Dawn and Denise and their willingness to speak, to tell their story. And God, I pray that we prayed it ahead of time, that our hearts were ready to receive that we were ready to hear the things that they were going to bring. And so for anybody that was here in person and that's going to be watching on the stream, I pray that they see past politics, they see past things to debate, that they see past legislation, and they see humanity. They see human beings that were created by you, that were knit together in their mother's wombs, wanting to live life, and how we can participate in that with them. God, I pray that your spirit of love moves not only among us, not only among our city, but amongst this world where we see just so much hatred and bigotry taking place, not just here, but worldwide. God, I pray that you would begin to speak to us right now about the things that we can do realistically to start making this place different. How do we, if we're straight, how do we become a good ally and a good advocate? If we're queer, how do we step into those spaces with Dawn and with Denise to make a difference? And not only in their lives, but also in the lives of these young kids here, these students in our state that are being trying to be erased. Lord, we're thankful for this place. I'm thankful for this place, and I'm thankful for this space to be able to be a part of this. To be able to do this work. God, I pray that you just continue to grow it, continue to bless it, not because we need a brand, but because people need that narrow path that leads to life. And it's your name that we pray all these things. Amen.